Hi, my name is Deborah Henne. Welcome back to the Sounds Like Freedom podcast. I'm here with my guest, author David Feldman, and he is the author of Six Mysteries, a standalone novel, and a nonfiction World War II memoir. He's won 2 film awards and a playwriting contest. He has an MLS degree in library and information science, and he loves to play piano and sing professionally and loves to paint, which he does both for fun and for commission. And he adores his wife, 2 sons, and their Yorkie. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Debbie. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? It sounds like you're quite an artist. You write, you paint, you play piano, you sing.
Well, that's all of that is true. When you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice, and when you squeeze me, you get art. Um, I've had quite a few challenges, many of them health challenges in the last few years, and others as well. I'm sober nearly 30 years, and I've overcome, as I say, all kinds of health challenges, depression, surgeries, and all of that. The angst from all of that comes out in my art, and I grew up reading constantly, and I still read constantly. And I decided I wanted to be a writer very early on, and that's what I've set about doing.
That's awesome. And I love how you said, art is an expression for yourself. I found the same thing. I don't do visual arts at all. I'm bad at stick figures. My kids laugh at my art at times, but I write. So I write, I think as a teenager and going through all those teenager struggles, poetry was a lifesaver for me. It was my form of expression. It was like an outlet. And then as I've matured and I've grown, it's kind of gone more into worship and praise and an expression in that way. But you're right. I mean, when you get squeezed, what comes out? What's in comes out, right?
Absolutely, and for me, God is featured very centrally in most of my work because he's been featured centrally in most of my life. Um, my relationship with God has been central to my getting sober. I mean, it's really sort of a requirement in getting clean and sober, and I'm very involved in those activities. Things that we do to get and stay clean and sober, and to help other people. And God is part and parcel of that. And that's been a really interesting journey for me because I was not raised in a family where God was talked about at all. My parents were agnostics. They weren't really against the idea, but it was a very foreign notion to them. They didn't understand the idea because I think they were very separated. They Both of my parents had parents, my grandparents, who were observant, but they themselves were very separated from that somehow. I don't know exactly how, but they didn't connect to the idea, and I connect to the idea because I had to, because I really, really, I mean, what really drove me to getting connected to God was that I really, really wanted to stop doing drugs. I mean, the worst day of my life, possibly anyway, it was very likely the best day of my life because it was, I was a new father, and my first son was about a year old, and I was taking care of him one day, and I had had a few, and he got hurt, and it was over, and I became instantly absolutely ready to do absolutely anything to change, and I think God likes that. Some willingness is at least in the circles I travel in, willingness is central to developing a relationship with God. Having that need and having nowhere else to turn, um, and talking to people who were clean and sober, it was suggested to me that, you really might make it your business to develop a relationship with God. And that's what I did. I said about, if I wanted what those people had, I had to do what those people were doing. And that's what I did. And and it was very confusing to me. I didn't go to church. It's not, I was not raised in a church atmosphere. I'm Jewish by birth, and I was not raised in that atmosphere either. But so I said, what do you do? How do you come to believe in something that you don't understand, you can't see? Um, and what I was told was to develop a practice of act as if you have a God in your life. And my reaction was, well, how do I do that? Talk to him. Just start talking to him in your car, in the shower, anywhere. Maybe eventually you'll start hitting your knees, um, but at least at the beginnings, just start talking to him. And I did, and boy, did stuff happen. Boy, did stuff happen. I my experience has been that God does not make too difficult terms for those who seek him. And I sought him and I found him. And I have to tell you, it that has been central to my life in every I talk to God all the time about everything. Um, Sometimes I'm talking to my grandmother. I adored my grandmother, and she's long gone. But I grew up around a lot of violence, physical and emotional violence, and my grandmother was kind of a savior to me. But as my relationship with God developed, I it became a more religious kind of a thing, and um, I'm a big reader. I've read the Bible. I've read the Old Testament. I've read the New Testament. I'm a big fan. I know probably a lot of your listeners are Christian. And I have to say, I gravitated and fell in love with the Sermon on the Mount. Um, I went, it, someone along the way, I'm not quite sure who, suggested that I look at the religion of my birth, and so I did, and I got involved in that in my 50s. I'm in my 60s now, and I made my bar mitzvah at 55, and it's all been just wonderful. It's really all been just a wonderful experience, and I ask God what I should write next. God shows up in my writing, in the confusion of my characters who don't know what to do or who to turn to. I have, in my most recent books, two women, one of whom is a practicing Buddhist and the other of whom is Jewish. She's very similar to me in her belief system, and they talk about God all the time. And the Dora, my main character, who's Jewish, is surprised when Missy, who is a Buddhist, is fine with talking about God. She says, I didn't know a Buddhist believed in God. She says, I believe in direct experience, and if I have direct experience with a dear friend who believes in God, who am I to say there's no God? And so I talked to God about what I should write, who I should write about. I asked God, help me find my socks. It can be just about anything. A lot of what I ask for is guidance, is comfort, is hold my hand, and a lot of what I say is thank you. I've learned how to see how blessed I am, and how, I mean, I found myself, I've had a whole bunch of surgeries. I had a hip replacement. I had a double hernia. Um, I had spine surgery where I was heading towards being paralyzed. I was playing piano at a steak and sushi joint out in the Hamptons of Long Island, and I found my piano playing. My fingers weren't working right, and I was starting to stumble when I walked. So I went to a spine surgeon who said, "You need spine surgery, and you need it now." And my wife had said, don't, when you talk to this doctor, she wasn't with me at the doctor. When you talk to this doctor, don't make any more surgery appointments. And I said, well, if he says you need one, maybe I'll make one. So I did. And I had my spine surgery. And 3 days later, I found myself in an ambulance. Um, I had been told I have, and I was convalescing from spine surgery. And I got very, very physically ill. and went to the emergency ward, and they said, you need abdominal surgery. You have air in your intestines. And they threw me in an ambulance. And in the ambulance, I found myself just saying, kind of praying in a way, but not, I don't know what you'd call it. It's kind of like when you squeeze me, this is what came out. And I was being squeezed. And what came out was surrender, 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 surrender. God's going to take care of this. If you're going to die, well, you're going to die. And I found myself in a hospital room waiting for a surgeon. And the surgeon finally came in after a long, long time. And he said, well, we need to cut a piece out of your intestines. And um, I said, well, God's going to take care of you and you're going to take care of me. And he said, exactly. Exactly. And that's what happened. And I have to say, it was all of these things were very frightening. I'm not going to say, believing in God didn't leave me unafraid, but it left me afraid, but very willing to go forward in all of them, in all of these things, in my writing, in, in terms of getting health care for the challenges I've had in my marriages. I'm married to a treasure of a woman for 36 years. We've been together 38 years. And, she's evidence of God. And she's a scientist. And she's a scientist who sees nature as evidence of God. So for those who might think a scientist can't believe in God, many do. Many do. For many, let's take a look at science, and it's, where did all this come from? How does it all fit together so well? Coincidence? I think not. So I'm going on a bit, but you asked about me, and so that's about me.
No, I love it. Thank you for sharing your story and thank you for sharing all of that. And I think just want to pull out a few things. How you said that you had to come into a place where you needed God and you had to be willing to make those changes. And I think that is so key, because even in smaller things in life, if I think, oh, I got this, I'm good. I don't. It
That's
doesn't
right.
take long to realize I don't got this, because it's only God. And it's only God in and through each one of us as we seek Him and as we do that surrender. It's like a daily surrendering every moment of every day to God. And I think that is so key when it comes to overcoming because we always talk about, living in the victory and living in the overcoming. And I always say that's the promise, but there's a process to the promise. And there's a process of dependency, there's a promise or a process of surrender in order to live in that promise. Um, so yeah, so I just kind of wanted to pull that out because I think that's so powerful, and I love that you shared your faith journey with us, going from having, none really to finding God and finding, a relationship, a real vibrant relationship with the Lord. And I know that as we each continue to pursue God, He'll continue to draw us deeper and deeper into Him. But yeah, absolutely. And I love how you touched on science because I am such a science nerd. I love science. And the one of the latest things, and this is just me geeking out here, um, I've been reading about epigenetics and how in Deuteronomy it talks about, God will visit the iniquities to the third and the fourth generations, but the blessings are for 1,000, right? And I always kind of got hung up on this third and fourth generation. Like, God, come on. So I looked into that, and in the Hebrew, it actually talks about how He will attend to it. He will attend to that sin for 3 or 4 generations. And now scientists more recently are studying epigenetics, and that is, so we all have DNA, right? But the DNA, our thoughts, they're finding that our thoughts and beliefs and our actionable choices actually influence the genetic expression and that gets carried on through the generations. And they found it to be, guess what? 4 generations that my thoughts and my choices will get passed down through my genetic line for 4 generations. So it was an ancient, it's new science, but proving the Bible and saying, God says, I'm going to visit, you know, wrong choices and choices that don't line up with me and my goodness and my holiness down to the fourth generation, because that's how long the effects of epigenetics is. I want to make sure it's rooted out because my blessing is forever. and it's ongoing, it's continual, and I don't want that to block the blessing that I want to bring through each family line. So it's just so neat to see how, I always say science and faith are not, they're not enemies. They go together, they really do. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, I find that real. What I don't know that I ever heard the word epigenics,
Hmm.
um, but I find your description of it to be very inspiring and very comforting. In that the choices that I do, it's funny. This I think that I've had um, conversations with my wife about this. I'm not sure she buys it the way I buy it, but I really believe that my choices and my love of God and the path that I'm on um, is something that is being imprinted in my DNA and is being passed on to my son. I have two grown sons. Is being passed on to my children and, God willing, my grandchildren and so forth.
Hmm.
I didn't know about the fourth generation. I don't have the Bible at my fingertips, but I have a little bit of it. I do some of it, do some Bible study. It's interesting. I was very sick with clinical depression in 2005. Very, very sick. We have that illness in my family. We have 4 suicides in my family, and I have someone very close to me in my family who's been incapacitated and unable to work for decades. And it's something that I didn't understand, and I know I don't think my brother understood it either. We would kind of say, like, come on, look around, everything's okay, everything's fine. And but I got sick in 2005, and as soon as I got sick, I went, oh, oh, this is a real illness. And so, but what I did was, I didn't know what to do. I was very, very, I was just really sick. I kind of had to sit in a dark, quiet room for like a month. And, but what I did was, I said to my wife, I want to go see my rabbi. Um, I pay him. I I paid quite a bit of dues there. I guess you could call it tithing, and at the time it was paying for my sons to go to religious school. Um, so I'm gonna go. I want to go see him. And what did he say to me? Read the Bible. He said that's what you need to do is read the Bible. And I thought, oh well, of course that's what my rabbi is going to say. I had a somewhat cynical view of that, but I was so incapacitated that I really couldn't do anything else. I couldn't work at the time. I wasn't writing back then. And so I studied with him and I read the Bible. Well, guess what? Every time, and the first 5 books of the Bible are essentially the Tanakh, the Torah. And every time I read Torah, and we were reading it in Hebrew, I felt better. I felt better. I don't know how to explain it. I've read things that, there are, because it's chanted in the original, the Hebrew and the Aramaic, it's chanted in melodies called tropes. And I have read that the tropes were developed because the tones are healing. Now, I don't know about that. This is all above my pay grade, but I did do this and I felt better. And then I connected with a bunch of guys who are involved in recovery, drug and alcohol recovery, and they were going to Christian retreats. And I fell in with them, and I found them. Their beliefs were somewhat different from mine, and their religious background was different from mine. But God put us together. That's the only thing I could say. And we had very different politics. We had very different views about certain social issues. Didn't matter. We never talked about that stuff. We went to these retreats, and after a while, my wife said, you know, it's Thursday. You need to go on your retreat because these people healed me. And God healed me through the relationships with these people and these circumstances. And I have no other explanation for it. But I do believe that all you got to do is ask. All you got to, and a big key for me in accessing my faith and my relationship to God and the creativity that is really, God's all about creativity. So all of this creativity that I'm telling you and you've read that I do is all in service to God. It might not be all religious in terms of the content, but at the heart of it, it all is, because I write a lot about confused people and frustrated people and angry people who their solution is God. And that was my solution. I mean, I grew up around violence, and my solution is God. And a big part of accessing these answers is remembering that that's the case. For me to remember to turn my life over to God's care, I have to remember that that's the answer, because sometimes I forget. Now, it does seem, and I don't know if God actually works this way, but it does seem that I get kind of slapped in the back of the head by life so that I'll remember. Now, I don't know if God caused my illnesses that I needed, where I needed surgery, and I clung to God, for the answers. I don't know if God causes illness. I think illness is a part of life. I just don't know. There are people who do believe that that's all part of God's plan, and maybe it is. I don't know. But those things caused me to remember that I need God.
Absolutely. And I think that is a hard question. I think a lot of people grapple with that because, things happen in life that aren't good, um, and that are hard and painful and difficult. And my personal take is that we live in a fallen world, and bad things happen, but my God is good, and He promises to work all things for the good. He didn't say everything is good, and not everything in my life is going to be good, but He promises I will make good out of it because He is good. Um, so that's kind of my take on it. I say, we live in a fallen world and these things happen. But if I can move forward and trust in the Lord and move forward, trusting Him and following Him, He will somehow make a good out of it. Um, yeah, absolutely. And those are
Yeah, I
some.
feel that way too. And it helps me to hear people say that. It's like a nice tap on the shoulder, like, "Hey, Dave, don't forget, you know, our God is good,
Mhm.
and good. Whatever you see around you, God can make good out of it." And I do my best to do that in my stories. My standalone novel, The Neighborhood, is about bigotry. I grew up in a town that was 100% white back in the 70s. And when a family of color moved in around the block from us, people burned a cross on their lawn. And my mother went over and walked around the block to their house, knocked on the door. And when the person came to the door, said, "Listen, I'm a neighbor, and I want you to know you're welcome here. You're welcome here." Um, and so I grew up in this town that was that way. And I heard a lot of bigoted language, about all kinds, about anyone who was different, about people of color, about people who were from different backgrounds. um, I'm Jewish by birth, and when I was 6 years old, a bunch of kids told me to go back in my house and don't come out until I'm not Jewish anymore. 16-year-old kids, 18, who were gigantic to me. I was a tiny little kid. um, and so I wrote about four families in this town, three of whom are white, one of whom is the first black family, and the struggles and the explosiveness that happens when this family moves there. But what I found is, I've connected to a lot of the people I grew up around through Facebook, and that's a good thing about Facebook. I get to reconnect with people that I was friends with when I was 5 and 7, 60 years ago. Um, and what I see is that people who used a lot of offensive language towards people who were different from them, people who used bigoted language about all sorts of, about me, about Jews, about anyone, people who were Italian American, Irish American, Black American, they had bad words for all these people. They now have blended families. they have their children married some of these people, and they have grandchildren who are all different colors and who are all different backgrounds. And so what I wrote about is people having the experience of being around people who are different. In the Bible, it talks about the other, about being kind to the stranger among us. Um, and people learning that those who are different are people, they're human beings. And they may look different, they may have different customs, they might seem strange at first, but when we're around them for a while, we see that they're people, and we all grow stronger. We're all God's children. All of us, every one of us are God's children. He might not like things I think he loves all of us. I really do. All of us. He might not like things we do. And as a father raising children, my children had to experience the consequences of their bad behavior. And I believe that's the case as God's children. We experience the consequences of our bad behavior, but we also learn to live together alongside one another. And we learn to, um, we might not love all the individuals, but we can at least coexist, if not love other people. And I think that's a big part of God's message. That's my own, might not be everyone's belief, but that's my belief in the God that I believe loves us all.
Absolutely. Calls us to love. He doesn't call us to judge. When I read the Bible, he calls us to discern, but not to judge one another. And to, yeah, to behave in love and to move forward in kindness and in mercy. 100%. Yeah. So not overcoming our differences and living in unity. Absolutely. 100%. So you have some books out there. Can you tell us where people can go to find out more about you and get your books?
Sure. My name is David E. Feldman, and the E is important because there are other David Feldmans who are writers, and I'm sure their books are wonderful, but I'm David E. Feldman. Um, I wrote the Dora Ellison Mystery Series, which is 6 books starring Dora Ellison, a woman who grew up around abuse and violence and who struggles with violent tendencies, but also believes in God. And my books really aren't religious, but God is in there, woven into the fabric of the books. And these are mysteries, and they're thrillers, and they're murder mysteries. So, and they're all on Amazon, all of those books. My book, The Neighborhood, which is my standalone novel about the 4 families in what was then the all-white town of Valley Stream, New York, is also on Amazon. It's a novel. It's a standalone novel. And those are really the main books I want to talk about. I have some other things coming out. I'm writing a book now to honor my father. Um, I had some challenges with my father. We had our ups and downs, but through my recovery and through my love of God, I came to appreciate him and to see that he overcame severe handicap. He had polio when he was 2, and he had lost the use of his left leg throughout his life and much of the use of his right. And he was angry, an angry man. In any case, I'm writing a book called Percival. His name was not Percival, but he used to tell me a story about Percival when I was a little boy. And so it's called Percival, and it's fiction, but it's really about my dad. And all my books are on Amazon under the name David E. Feldman, which is also my website, davidefeldman.com.
Okay, great. So go to his website, davidefeldman.com. Check out his books on Amazon. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget to swipe, tap, or click over to deborahhenne.com. Follow me on social media at Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Deborah Henne Author. And let's not forget to tune into our thoughts to make sure they sound like Jesus's, so they sound like freedom.
Thanks so much, Deborah. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for joining me.